Good day to one and all. I am Miss A. Krishna Sundar, Assistant Professor, Department of English, KAHM Unity Women's College, Manjeri. Today we would be discussing in detail one of the most famous poems written by the author Ted Hughes. So the title of the poem is View of a Pig. So before we step into the poem, a few details regarding the author. Ted Hughes, who was born in 1930 and he passed away in the year 1998. As you are looking at the picture, maybe you can realize the fact that Ted Hughes was considered as one of the most handsomest writers in the history of British literature. So, a few basic things regarding the author. His full name is Edward James Hughes and he was born in 1930 in Yorkshire. He was born to William Henry and Edith. He spent the initial first 6 years of his life among the farms, and that was one major reason why he turned towards animals and birds as the main subject in his poetry. Later, his family moved to Mexborough and he studied at Schofield School. Later, he attended the Mexborough Grammar School and he wrote his first poems at the age of 15. He was supported very much by his sister and his brother. He was also having a very deep connection with John Holy, who was a gamekeeper. A gamekeeper is someone who takes care of the estate and the properties. So he was very much in connection with John Holy, who was working as a gamekeeper at Crook Hill Estate, and this association actually helped him to know more about the animal world, not just the animal world, but the entire natural world. He was also a great fan of Shakespeare and Yeats. He studied at Cambridge, and at Cambridge he spent most of his time reading. He read folklore and Yeats' poems, and later he switched from English to archaeology. Later he turned to anthropology in his third year. Now, in relation to a piece which he wrote in connection with the poem Thought Fox, he mentions the very same fact, how he was very much inspired to learn more about archaeology and anthropology. His first published poem appeared in 1954, the year when he graduated from Cambridge. From 1955 to 56, he got into different jobs. He became a rose gardener, later a night watchman, then he was a part of a zoo, and later a school teacher. So maybe it was this wide variety of experiences which helped him to write more about the natural world. He had plans to teach in Spain and then emigrate to Australia. So you can see Ted Hughes at a later stage as an old Ted Hughes. Now here comes the reason and the ways which helped him to meet one of the greatest icons in American literary field, that is Sylvia Plath. Now, Ted Hughes had actually contributed to a literary magazine which is titled as the St. Berthold's Review, and as a part of a party arranged in connection with St. Berthold's Review, he meets Sylvia Plath, the American poetess, for the very first time. Now, this acquaintance slowly developed into a friendship and they got married within 4 months. Hughes' first collection of poems, Hawk in the Rain, appeared in the year 1957. He won the Harper Publication Contest for this collection of poetry, and in the year 1984 he was appointed as England's Poet Laureate. having a deep analysis into his married life, which has definitely contributed to his poetic life as well. It was a 7-year marriage with the American poet Sylvia Plath that Hughes had, and they got married in the year 1956. Birthday Letters by Hughes is a continuous conversation with Plath. So here you can see the house where they lived, which is situated at Primrose Hill. And here are some beautiful pictures of Hughes and Plath together. The relationship went well during the initial years, and both of them were able to support each other with their poetry collection. But Plath separated in the year 1962, and by the time they were already having 2 children, Freda and Nicholas. The reason that Plath states here for separation is actually Ted Hughes' relationship with Ezia Wevell. Now, soon after her separation in the year 1962, she commits suicide in the year 1963. Now, after Plath's death and after a number of years, Hughes considers Ezia Wevell, as his partner. But it becomes a real tragedy when Wevell too dies of asphyxiation in the very same way in which Plath killed herself. Apart from that, Wevell kills their only daughter Alexandria, who is otherwise known as Shura. But years later, Ted Hughes gets married to his private secretary, whose name is Carol Orchard, and that was in the year 1970. But initially, if you look at the married life of Ted Hughes and Plath, we can see that it was a very, very complementing kind of relationship where they were able to support each other by poetic inspiration. So here are a few pictures of Ted Hughes and Sylvia Plath again. Now this is Plath's family. Now this is one of the most beautiful pictures, which is actually my favorite picture. So here you can see Ted Hughes with his kids, Freda and Nicholas. So again you can see Sylvia Plath with the 2 kids. Now these are the same kids who are grown up now. Now this is Nicholas and this is Freda, but unfortunately Nicholas commits suicide during his late 40s. So moving on to the next part of his life, this is Ezia Wevell, and you can see this is a 4-year-old daughter, Alexandria. So she killed herself and she killed her daughter too through asphyxiation. So asphyxiation is actually when the entire air, because they have switched on the oven and the entire air gets filled with carbon dioxide, so it's a poisonous gas they are actually inhaling, and this would be the cause of the death. Now Sylvia Plath too committed suicide in the very same way. So Plath committed suicide in 1963 and they had already separated in the year 1962. And just because of this, many held Hughes responsible for Plath's death. And that definitely was triggered by his adulterous relationship with Ezia Wevell. Though deeply marked by the loss, Hughes was publicly silent on the subject for more than 30 years. A sense of responsibility to protect the couple's 2 young children. This could have been the reason for Hughes' silence. And the perceptions of their mother would have been marred by external interference if Hughes might have talked something about this. Hughes became the executor of Plath's personal and literary estates. He oversaw the publication of her manuscripts, including Ariel, in the year 1966. He is also claimed to have destroyed the final volume of Plath's journal, detailing their last few months together. So there are a number of feminists who are still criticizing Ted Hughes for the death of Sylvia Plath. Now in the year 1969, on March 23, Ezia Wevell killed herself in a similar manner to that of Sylvia Plath. She turned on the gas in the oven without lighting it and dissolved some sleeping pills for herself in a glass of whiskey. She murdered their 4-year-old daughter too in this process. Later, it was in the year 1970 that Hughes gets married to Carol Orchard. She's a nurse and who was 20 years younger to him. He dies in the year 1998 on 28th October. A decade later, almost a decade later, in March 2009, their son, Hughes and Platt's son, Nicholas Hughes, committed suicide at the age of 47. He hanged himself at his home in Alaska following a battle with depression. He was a professor of fisheries and ocean sciences but had recently left his position to take up pottery. So moving on to the poetic style of Ted Hughes. So definitely you have a clear knowledge about his personal life now, because definitely the personal life would reflect in the poetic life too. So coming to the poetic style of the poet, he called himself an animal poet. And he has always tried depicting the violent forces of nature. He gave importance to primitive and instinctual rather than the intellectual or civilized kind of knowledge. And by portraying a number of animals and birds, he was in a way trying to portray the animal side of human beings. And when you look at his poetic style, one definite feature that you can identify is that his poems are basically rational in style, they are objective, and they are detached. And during the 1960s, Western world was turning more scientific, and there was a kind of disconnectedness happening within humanity. So Hughes was definitely trying to speak about this disconnectedness in a weird world. The tendency towards aggression is also portrayed within his poems. Now, some of the major collections of poems: The Hawk in the Rain, which was published in the year 1957. Then there is Lupercal in 1960. Now, Lupercal, again, those who have read Julius Caesar might know about Lupercalia Festival. Now, Lupercalia is a festival which is actually celebrated in association with fertility. So this again relates to the primitive or the kind of forces that people believed in the earlier centuries. Then comes Vaudeville in the year 1967. So Vaudeville is again a word which means a man from the woods. So something connected with the primitive man. So now let's move on to the poem View of a Pig. Now what is this poem about? Now in the very first glance, the poem looks very, very simple, and there are certain themes which are connected with the poems. Now the very first one is animal slaughter, because this is definitely about a dead pig. When you look at the title, we are not quite sure whether the pig is a live pig or whether it is a dead pig, but unfortunately the poet here is talking about a dead pig. So definitely one of the most important themes here is animal slaughter. Then comes cruelty of human beings, because when we talk about animal slaughter, we understand it is not a natural death. So automatically the responsibility is on the human beings. So how these animals become market products in our social life. So in a way, Hughes is talking just like an environmentalist, and maybe because he is a poet who remained during the post-war period, and he is a poet who has witnessed the erosion of human emotions, his true respect for nature is depicted through most of the poems, because he portrays both sides of nature, nature as a soothing mother and nature as aggressive and violent. But in both these cases, Hughes appreciates nature within the context of nature. So he talks about the cruelty of human beings, how human beings are actually marring down the real sophistication and refinement within the natural kind of landscape, and how these animals and birds are brutally treated by human beings. So this is definitely an unsettling kind of poem. Once when you read the poem, this is definitely going to take your sleep away. So here is a poem. The pig lay on a barrow dead. It weighed, they said, as much as 3 men. Its eyes closed, pink white eyelashes. Its trotters stuck straight out. So the pig was lying on a barrow. You can see the picture of a barrow here. Now, barrow is something which is used as a tool, especially in farmlands. So this is something which is used to carry certain objects and tools to some other places. So it was on such a barrow that the dead pig was lying. So the very first line of the poem is giving you the picture of a dead pig. So it is not a beautiful sight, it is not an appealing sight, it is in fact a repulsive sight. It weighed, they said. So there is somebody here, they. It is not the poet. It weighed as much as 3 men. So look at the weight of the pig. It is huge in size, as much as 3 men. Its eyes closed, pink white eyelashes. Its trotters stuck straight out. So look at the eyes of the pig. It is closed and it has got pink white eyelashes. So this actually reminds the features of a small baby. So within the first stanza, the poet in a way is trying to evoke sympathy in the mind of the audience or the readers. Its trotters stuck straight out. So you can imagine the position in which the pig is lying. It is lying with all the feet, the small trotters, stuck straight out. So it is a very repulsive sight, a very sad sight, because the pig here is a dead pig which is very huge in size and it is not showing any kind of dignity as of the moment. But look at the description that Hughes goes on with. The eyes closed, pink, white eyelashes and trotters stuck straight out. So it's a detailed kind of description that the poet gives, and through this description he is actually evoking the sympathy of the readers. Such weight and thick pink bulk. So see, now the pig is actually reduced to food. Look at the weight, look at the thick pink bulk. So see the words which are used here, weight, bulk. So it is no more treated as an animal. It is just commercialized. It is just measured in terms of weight and bulk. Certain death seemed not just dead. So the pig has gone beyond the realms of death. It was less than lifeless. Now see, lifeless itself is equal to dead, but less than lifeless means it is beyond death. The pig has even crossed the boundaries of death, further off. It was like a sack of wheat. So like a sack of wheat, see the comparison. The pig, which is a living creature, or maybe which was a living creature, is just compared to a sack of wheat. So see how death makes us objects. This is what Hughes is talking about. Now, sometimes it happens even with human life. The moment a person dies, we never utter the name of the person. The person becomes a body. We say the body, the funeral is at this time, the body would be taken off, the body would be reaching, the body is in the ambulance. This is how we describe. So death has that power by which it can reduce people to objects. So the pig here is compared to a sack of wheat. So there is a figure of speech which is coming here similarly. And more than that, we understand that it is robbed of its dignity. The pig is not given any kind of respect, and nobody is thinking about it as a living creature, at least believing that it once had a life. So it is just commercialized here. It is just measured in terms of weight and bulk. I thumbed it without feeling remorse. One feels guilty insulting the dead. Now usually it is only with reverence and respect that we address the dead. But here the poet is trying to thumb it. To thumb means to poke with your hand. So I thumbed it without feeling remorse. So the poet is not feeling any kind of remorse. He is not having any guilt feeling for thumping the dead pig. One feels guilty insulting the dead, walking on graves. We never do that. We never walk on graves because grave is a place where the dead people are buried. So we have to give some kind of respect towards these places. We shouldn't insult the dead. But here the poet is thumping the dead pig and he says, but this pig did not seem able to accuse. But this pig will never blame the poet for thumping its dead body because it was too dead. So he is getting back to the same point which he had already discussed in the second stanza, that it has even crossed the boundaries of death. Just so much a poundage of lard and pork. So lard is actually the oil that you get, and pork again the meat. So see, it is just reduced to commercialization. So it is just the weight of the flesh that can be taken from its body. So it is not even considered as a living being. Its last dignity had entirely gone. It was not a figure of fun. So even the last dignity, because normally when people die or when anything, let it be an animal or a bird, whatever it is, death gives you some kind of honor. Even the people who hated you will definitely talk good things about you when death embraces you. But for this particular pig, even that is not happening. Even the last dignity had entirely gone, and it was not a figure of fun. A pig is always ridiculed, maybe because of the physical features that it has got. It is bulky in size, and if you look at the physical features, it is all kind of blunt features that a pig has got. So a pig is always considered as a figure of fun. But here, the pig is not even deserving to be ridiculed. So it has crossed the boundaries of death. So it has crossed the realms of life and death, and it is into a place where nobody actually understands that it once had an existence. So it was not a figure of fun too. Too dead now to pity, to remember its life-dim stronghold of earthly pleasure as it had been, seemed a false effort and off the point. So it is too dead. He is actually reiterating the very same point. It is too dead now to pity. Even to feel pity, something has to be dead. But this pig has crossed even the borders of death. To remember its life-din stronghold. So life, din is a confusion, and stronghold of earthly pleasure as it had been, seemed a false effort and off the point. Even to remember that this pig once had a life in connection with the earthly pleasure. Maybe this is a pig in its life who would have made a lot of noise, who would be running around, creating troubles for the people. But even that cannot be memorized. Even that cannot be realized because it all seemed a false effort and off the point. Now, sometimes we feel the very same thing even with certain people. When certain people die, sometimes you get the feeling that what was all the effort for, the running, the moving, all these things, what was it ultimately for? So the same thing happens here. We even forget to realize the fact that this pig once had a strong life, which means a very, very healthy life within this earth. Too deadly factual. So the truth is that it is too dead. Its weight oppressed me. How could it be moved? So see, even the poet is taking a very, very ambivalent kind of attitude. On one side, the poet is sympathetic towards the creature, but on the other side, the size, the weight is actually oppressing him. It oppressed me, the weight oppressed me, how could it be moved? So he's actually asking a very practical kind of question. How can this pig be moved? Because it is said in the very first stanza that it weighs as much as 3 men. So such huge size, how can you remove it? And the trouble of cutting it up. So see, he is actually looking at the pig from a commercialized angle. So how can such a huge thing be cut up into pieces? Because you need to cut it up because you're going to sell the flesh. The gash in its throat was shocking but not pathetic. So there was a wound in its throat which is definitely a wound made by a human being while killing it. So even that wound looked shocking but not pathetic. So it's a very repulsive, oppressive kind of feeling that the poet is getting here. Once I ran at a fair in the noise. So now he is going back to his past memories, because this is not something which is happening in the present. When he looks at the pig, he is suddenly triggered with a kind of his past memory. He says, once I ran at a fair in the noise. Fair means it can be some kind of a festival, a celebration, or a carnival. So once I ran at a fair in the noise to catch a greased piglet. So once I remember running behind a pig that was faster and nimbler than a cat. Now, a cat is always appreciated or maybe praised for the kind of speed it has got. It runs, it moves very quickly. But this pig was even faster and nimbler than a cat. It squealed. Squeal is the noise that it makes. It was like the rending of the metal. Now, if you go to some factories and workplaces, you can see how the metal actually is tuned within a number of equipment. It's a very irritating, annoying kind of sound. So the squeal, the kind of noise made by this pig was just like the rending of metal. Pigs must have hot blood. They feel like ovens. So from this we understand that the poet might have touched a pig. So he says they have hot blood. They feel like ovens. So they feel like giving you a kind of burning sensation. Their bite is worse than a horse's. So, maybe we do not know whether he was bitten by a pig, but he says the bite is worse than a horse's. You can imagine the horse, the tooth. So, definitely, it is more worse than a horse means it is going to be really, really worse. They chop a half moon clean out. They eat cinders and dead cats. They chop a half moon clean out. Now, so this is a kind of comparison that the poet is making to discuss the sharpness of the teeth, or maybe to discuss how strong the bite is. They can even chop a half moon clean out. So, in reality, it is impossible. You can't eat the half moon. But he is actually bringing this kind of a comparison to speak about the intensity of its bite. They can even chop a half moon clean out. It is as strong as that. They eat cinders and dead cats. So this is their life. Distinctions and admirations such as this one was long finished with. So distinctions and admirations. Now usually, even if you were a person who never got any kind of distinctions or admirations in life, you would get all these when you die, because that is how the society is. Even if you dislike a person, if that person dies, definitely you would be talking a lot of good things about that person. So distinctions and admirations, these are things which you get at least at the time of death. But with this particular pig, even that remains impossible, as this one was long finished with, because nobody is going to care about this dead pig. It is just going to be cut up into pieces and it is going to be sold out. I stared at it a long time. They were going to scald it and scrub it like a doorstep. So they were going to scald it. Now, to scald means to clean with hot water. Now, that is how you clean the meat, especially this flesh. So you have to clean it thoroughly with hot water and scrub it. Scrub again is another word for cleansing. So scrub it like a doorstep. So see the comparison, the image that he is using. Now, how do you clean the doorstep of your house? You clean it thoroughly, because that is an area where most people would likely be stepping in, the steps, the doorsteps. So you clean it thoroughly in such a way that it is so strong and intense, the cleaning. So that kind of an intense cleaning is going to happen with this pig. But the most disappointing part here is that this dead pig is compared to a doorstep which is cleaned. So the pig is just reduced to the quality of an object. So, total commercialization is what is happening here. There is nobody to think about the dead pig. There is nobody to cry for the loss of this dead pig. It is just going to be cut into pieces and it is going to be sold and it is going to be rated. So nobody thinks about this pig. So in a way, Hughes is actually making us think about human cruelty, because we never think about these instances when we definitely go for a non-vegetarian food. So he's definitely making us realize the pain which is going through behind the processes, because definitely it is not a natural death. You have to kill an animal which is just going to serve your table for one single meal. So he is trying to make us realize the pain that these animals go through while they are unnecessarily killed. So some of the questions that would help you to understand the poem in a better way: discuss Hugh's ambivalent attitude within the poem, because he himself is confused, as you might have seen. On one side he is sympathetic towards the animal, but on the other side he feels oppressed by looking at this animal. So he himself is in a conflicting position. The second question: the pig as a symbol of nature. Again, theme of brutality, that's what we discussed all through the poem. Then human attitude, again, brutality is very closely connected with human attitude. And finally, commercialization that is happening in the current scenario in the modern world. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot for listening patiently. Thank you.